I do love that one.
Let's see. Someone asked. Someone asked what species of dinosaurs survived the longest after the meteor. All the ones that are around today.
Yeah, well, in terms of species that really stuck around through the extinction before diversification, it was like early Galloanceres, so like kind of chicken duck things. Is it true that you don't find them complete but have to put them together? To a degree, I mean, that's true for some specimens, but there are complete dinosaur skeletons that were found articulated and complete with all the bones in place, like Eutyrannus, Sinosauropteryx, Borealopelta. A lot of the time we do find articulated specimens, but we sometimes find unarticulated specimens that are usually the result of a body falling into a river and then being pulled apart by the currents. And then those bones all kind of just end up laying in a pile. And then from there, we use the law of, not the law, but the principles of homology to put those bones in the same place because across all organisms, they're going to have bones in roughly the same place. So it is incredibly rare if you're using homological principles to get something wrong regarding the position of certain bones. What classifies a dinosaur? It is an archosaur with avimetatarsalien ankles. It has I believe most dinosaurs, no, not all dinosaurs, just theropods have a semilunate carpal. They have elongated zygapophyses on the neck. They have a synsacrum above their hips. They have a perforate acetabulum in their hips. Basically just a bunch of specific traits on the bones that ascribe to all dinosaurs. How do you know for a fact that dinosaurs roar? We don't. We don't know that. We have very little idea what dinosaur vocalization was like. We know they probably didn't make mammalian roars like lions or tigers did. But we have a sample size of 2 when it comes to any sort of vocal organ in dinosaurs, and a sample size of 1 when it comes to specifically soft tissue vocal organs. They have a syrinx, right? Not necessarily.
I don't know if we have evidence of that.
We don't have a syrinx. The syrinx shows up in birds. Panachosaurus has kind of an avian / crocodilian larynx. It's like a low down larynx, so it's not quite a syrinx.
There are some people asking about the formation and breaking apart of Pangea as a role in mass extinction events.
Not really, as far as I'm aware. The end Permian, I don't know about the formation of Pangea as responsible for mass extinction. I think the Devonian was thought to have been caused by volcanism. But the end Permian mass extinction, I know the leading hypothesis is volcanism. I'm working on a literature review regarding the end Permian right now. The geography of Pangea at the time the extinction was occurring definitely contributed. It was super flat, which made normally less volatile climate events much, much more threatening to the denizens of Pangea at the time. But in regards to the formation and breaking apart of Pangea causing mass extinction, it's not super plausible. Tectonic movement is super slow and usually doesn't happen quick enough for animals to be forced to adapt to the extent that they go extinct. What is the likelihood that the T-Rexes actually had wings and their arms were backwards? 0. For a variety of reasons that I've covered in previous videos. But also I will do it again. T-Rex didn't have quill knobs on its arms, so we know that there were no feathers attached to them to the degree that they would have to be for flight. Flight feathers are attached via quill knobs, not just skin. So, we would find that on the bones. Second, all of T-Rex's arm bones are fossilized and accounted for. There's no giant wing supporting structure that could be there because the principles of homology prevent that from occurring. We would see some sort of gradual evolution of T-Rex wings. None of T-Rex's other bones are hollow enough to support flight. There's not enough fusion in the skeleton of T-Rex to show evidence for weight reduction for flight. It has a really imbalanced body for flight, and it has no sternal keel to operate the muscles that are necessary for flight. What about bat-like wings, flightless? T-Rex is certainly flightless. It might have had small display feathers somewhere around its body, but there is just no possibility of really good flight feathers appearing within Tyrannosaurids. First dinosaur fossil. Well, dinosaur fossils have been uncovered for generations. The term, the dinosaurs really started getting talked about in the 1820s, but Thomas Jefferson was doing a lot of paleontology. He just didn't believe in extinction, so most of his paleontology was motivated by a desire to see these animals that he thought were still alive in real life. Thomas Jefferson died believing there were giant ground sloths and mammoths somewhere in America. That's part of the reason why he did the Lewis and Clark stuff. How do they know what color the dinosaurs were? Scanning electron microscope analyses of the fossilized cells within their feathers and skin, because the cells that produce certain pigments have shapes that correspond with the pigments they produce. So we can identify just from looking at them with a teeny tiny microscope that some cells were producing eumelanin pigments and some are producing pheomelanin pigments.
So the way they found out how Parasaurolophus sounded is the Parasaurolophus has like a big bony crest on its head that's hollow, and scientists kind of used it like a tuba or something like that.
Yeah, they made a cast of it, and they reconstructed soft tissue surrounding it with flexible like rubber. And then they passed air through it to generate a range of frequencies that they thought Parasaurolophus could produce by blowing air through its tube.
Yeah, so because of the fact that it was a big bony structure and not something small or I think soft like a larynx, it was preserved a lot better, and that's one of the few things we actually know about how dinosaurs sound.
And it's not even like how they sounded per se, it's a range of sounds they could have produced.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't know what Parasaurolophus's calls actually would have sounded like or anything like that. But we do have some good knowledge about the range of sounds they could have produced. Can you talk about Allosaurus? Sure. I worked on an Allosaurus a couple years ago in the Morrison Formation, and it, like many of the famous charismatic Allosaurus specimens, had some really nasty paleopathologies. A paleopathology is an injury that survives the fossilization process. So it had this Allosaurus specifically. Oh my God, look at the roof of that animal's mouth. This Allosaurus specifically had a rib fracture that this Allosaurus in particular had a rib fracture that healed really poorly and then got infected. So there was this giant lesion of tissue about halfway down the rib, and it bent in the wrong direction. So that was super cool to look at. It was not a super complete Allosaurus specimen, but it was. I don't even know if it was assigned to a specific species of Allosaurus, because most of those are diagnosed from head structure. I'm assuming it was Fragilis, because only Fragilis had been found at the site that I was digging. It was a riverbed site, so you didn't get a lot of complete material. But that was really cool. Predators in general live very rough lives. Why are theropods called lizard-hipped, not bird-hipped? Like, what happens? Aren't they bird ancestors? The earliest theropods had hips that were structured very similar to their ancestors, which are the crocodiles, and so they were called lizard-hipped. But as the theropod lineage, evolved and went on, they started to develop hips that were more and more similar to birds. But we didn't know that when the first theropods were found. We found megalosaurs, which have hips that are relatively similar to the first theropods. And so when the name Saurischia was coined, we only knew about the theropods that looked like, that had hips that looked like the other groups of reptiles. Ergo, lizard-hipped. And Iguanodon was named bird-hipped. This was way before the idea that birds could have ever evolved into dinosaurs. I mean, other way around, that dinosaurs ever could have evolved into birds. So they were really just going off of like general morphological similarity.
C. Hodges, oil and fossil fuels in general are not made from dinosaurs. They're actually made from decomposed plant matter from the Carboniferous period. The things that would decompose the matter in the ways you would typically find weren't around then, and so they were able to kind of sit and turn into oil and coal and stuff like that.
So what would happen is they would sit in a peat bog and they wouldn't be able to be decomposed with any real efficiency, and you would get very productive ecosystems that would just pile on more and more dead plant matter in this very anoxic environment. And then eventually you would get these big layers of peat that would be buried and dried, and then they would be compressed by pressure and heat, and they would be liquefied and turned into oil. What would be the requirements to have another cold layer? A ton of plant growth, a very wet world, um, and a very productive ecosystem in close proximity to water, where the water is still and does not facilitate decomposition.
C. Hodges was asking, how come some dinosaur muzzles are different shapes? What is the perfect shape? There isn't really a perfect shape for like heads of animals. Different animals kind of adapt to different things that they're doing and develop head shapes or other parts of their body that are better adapted to the specific niches they're filling. So there isn't really like a perfect shape. It's just that different head shapes are more well adapted to different things.
We got Jelly Roll. Welcome up, Jelly Roll. I like your profile picture, Jelly Roll. What's your question?
So I have two questions.
Sure, go ahead.
One is, did Alamosaurus live with Edmontosaurus?
What do you mean live with? They might. I think they lived at the same time, but I don't think they would have shared like a paleo environment. Because it's from Black Peaks, which so far as I'm aware, only includes Alamosaurus and some scattered pterosaur material. But Edmontosaurus is generally farther north than the Black Peaks Formation.
And my second question is, have we ever found convergent evolution in dinosaurs? Like, have we?
Absolutely. Like, do you mean with two dinosaur species converging on the same body plan, or just a dinosaur converging on the body plan of another organism?
The first one.
Okay. Yeah. I think there are a couple pretty good examples of that. Let me think about that for a moment. I would have to say my best example would be the convergent evolution of long browsing necks in Dacenturine stegosaurs and sauropods. So, obviously sauropods are known for having those very big, long necks, but there's a group of, not sauropods, stegosaurs from Portugal called the Dacenturines, one of which, Dacenturus, has a super, super long neck that it was using to eat, like, tree material. It has way more neck vertebrae than any other stegosaur. Dacenturus has a ridiculously long neck. And I would say that's a really strong example of convergent evolution because they're using the same solution to answer the same problem, where they need to reach tall growing plants, and they are using a long neck to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
No, that's it for now.
All right. Well, have a great night.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jay Downs was asking, do you believe the asteroid wiped them out solo, or did the Deccan traps deliver a 1-2 punch to them? You know more about that.
Jay Downs. Jay Downs. That's the initials of a very awesome paleontologist.
Oh.
Jason Downs.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm thinking about Jason Downs now. Man, he's so cool. Okay. I have the note set up here about. Oh my gosh. Where are you?
Somewhere up there. Might be the untitled.
It's the one here. So in general, the asteroid is pretty heavily causal. There has been some recent research done, and the thoughts surrounding like the Deccan traps exploding are that they are probably less relevant than previously expected. It's generally swinging in favor of the asteroid kind of initiating a climate cycle that would have killed off all the dinosaurs now. In general, the asteroid would have done it through a relatively rapid global cooling. There were some isotope analyses done on the atmospheric dust, and those indicate that it would have hung in the atmosphere for around 15 years total. and it would have been thick enough while it was in the atmosphere to block photosynthesis from occurring for about 2 years. So that's a 2-year photosynthesis pause. For the northern hemisphere, that would have been probably about 2 years and 6 months of winter weather, and for the southern hemisphere, it would have been probably about 1.5 years of winter weather, which explains why the fauna and flora of the southern hemisphere bounced back a lot more quickly than the northern hemisphere. There were also some scattered wildfires, which surprisingly contributed to global cooling rather than heating, because wildfires release soot, which then blocks the incoming solar rays.
J.K. Alid is asking about the diversity of birds during the Maastrichtian and abundance of birds during the Maastrichtian, and also asking about how your bird trip went.
My bird trip was excellent. I'm actually going to start entering my bird information now, because one of the people who I sent with, who is, I have to send this guy my, log on to eBird so we can share our list. ebird.org. It was pretty awesome. Oh my god. Okay. My eBird user. Sorry, I'm coordinating with my birding group because you just reminded me to do that. I saw loads of cool stuff. Probably the coolest thing I saw was a harlequin duck. I was walking down this line of rocks into the ocean, and it was pretty long. It was pretty far offshore. It was not even a proper trail. It was just kind of a stack of rocks. It was like a tide break. And I went out into the ocean, saw some cool stuff. I saw a great cormorant. And then I turned around and I walked back. And as I was standing on the beach waiting for the rest of the group, one of our members went like, there's a mated pair of harlequin ducks swimming around out there. And I just booked it back up to look at the harlequin ducks. And I saw them for maybe 15 seconds before they went and hid, but they're such beautiful birds. I also saw a pair of buffleheads doing a mating dance, which was super fun. It's always a treat when you get to see birds doing courtship stuff. Branching off to a real sound question. If so, then what do you think they would have sound like? Early dinosaurs definitely had a more archosaurian sound. It would probably be more bird-like than what you would expect from a crocodile. But I'm going to take this as a time to do my classic early sauropodomorph sound that I always do when people ask me this question. Yeah, so that's my early sauropodomorph question. I imagine maybe a young Plateosaurus would be making that. Please tell me some drama centered around a new paper. Can't think of anything off the top of my head. Probably the most drama I've seen around a new paper is people arguing online about how to reconstruct the cartilaginous or keratinous horn on the nose of Tamaryraptor. Because Joshua Knoop did an excellent even illustration for the paper of Tamaryraptor being like redescribed. And he did it with a little keratinous crest on the nose. And then a bunch of people started drawing it with the exact same keratinous crest, even though he made it very clear, both publicly and the people who made the paper also made it clear that keratinous crest was very, very speculative. It's based on a tiny, tiny piece of bone that maybe could have supported a crest, because that crest isn't the kind of thing that would fossilize. It's speculation. It's fine speculation. It's even well-founded speculation because it's based off of a minimal osteological correlate. But then people are like, okay, you can't do Tamaryraptor with a crest anymore. But no, it's fun. It's fine and enjoyable paleontology speculation. Yeah. What kind of mammals existed during the times of the dinosaurs? Mostly a lot of nocturnal small stuff. In the early Triassic, I believe you had some monotremes, or maybe not even the early Triassic. No, monotremes actually showed up in the Cretaceous. The The earliest mammals did show up in the Triassic, debatably, but we get mammal fossils are kind of sparse up until like the mid Jurassic, mid Cretaceous, and you don't really get non-egg laying mammals for sure until like placental mammals until the Paleogene in terms of fossil material. They might have been present in the Cretaceous, but what kind of degree do you need to get into paleontology? Most people I know that are working as full-time paleontologists are either master's students, like they're working towards their master's degree, or they already have their master's degree. And they usually did an undergrad in biology or geology or something along the lines. Sometimes geoscience, sometimes environmental science. How do we know what dinosaurs looked like? A combination of fossils that preserve external detail like skin, feathers, that sort of tissue, and osteological correlates, which are traits on the bone that line up with appearance in the skin. Was Maiasaurus truly parental? Yeah, there's pretty good evidence for parental care in archosaurs in general. Maiasaurus is a good example of that. I mean, we know that Maiasaurus nested communally, so parental care is pretty solidly likely. Sauropods, definitely.
Silver is Lost asked a little bit ago about how communal or parental behavior could be shown in fossils. If I'm remembering correctly,
yeah, you can go ahead.
I was going to say one of the ways that could be shown is through finding a lot of adult and child specimens of dinosaurs preserved together.
That goes more into sustained lifestyle as opposed to parental care. If you want to look at parental care, there is probably the best research I know about this is in pterosaurs, where they look at the ontogeny of pterosaurs, and they find out that a lot of pterosaurs, just like modern birds, were broadly altricial rather than precocial, which basically means that they were not functional for the first several weeks of their life, which indicates parental care would be necessary for those animals to survive. They would not survive if they were not being fed daily. And it's not true of all pterosaurs, but a lot of pterosaurs certainly did exhibit parental care. When it comes to dinosaurs, there's a lot of research into dinosaur nesting site dynamics. So, for example, hadrosaurs, Maiasaurus specifically, is known to return to the same nesting site year after year, and they presumably stay with those eggs in community for an extended period of time. It's not, generally true across all dinosaurs, but it is true in various groups of dinosaurs that parental care is present.
There was someone asking about whether we have found fossilized skin or feathers.
Yes, both.
Yes, both.
I was on a dig where we found fossilized Diplodocus skin a couple years ago in the Morrison Formation.
Just like impressions of it?
Yeah, it was skin impressions. So it was what we call the anti-slab, or the cast. But yeah, so we did find Diplodocus skin impressions, but you also do find, proper fossilized skin in places like Xinjiang in China. Sometimes that skin has feathers attached to it, so it's like a done deal. Why do people say that dinosaurs never existed? Why would they say that there are fossils? Because dinosaurs existing usually threatens something about their preconceived notions about the world. It's never that they're not convinced that dinosaurs exist. They have to have a reason, because nobody who's coming into understanding what a dinosaur is blind is going to just reject that evidence on its face because it's, quote, not conclusive, because it is conclusive. It's incredibly conclusive. Even like the most naturally skeptical person, if they were coming in blind, would understand that a dinosaur is a real taxonomic group that exists. Frankly, the reason, like I said, that people reject dinosaurs is because the existence of dinosaurs or something about it threatens their worldview.
How long would you say it took for you to join a field work project or dig?
I did that before I was in paleontology. I was doing field work when I was in high school, just as a volunteer. About a year and a half of doing full-time research, I just got accepted to my first paid field position where I'll actually be getting paid to go out in the field and do research, and that's going to be this summer. But historically, I've just been volunteering. But it's really not that difficult. I mean, you can get into the field with a surprising amount of ease.
Have they found any dinosaur blood or tissue in amber? There is a piece of a fossilized dinosaur tail, I think.
Yes,
in
in
amber.
amber. Not in amber, but we have actually found original, like very, very tiny. I mean, pretty much individual proteins of dinosaur tissue that's not part like completely permineralized, where there is some original biological material.
If you're wondering for Jurassic Park reasons,
No,
it would not be
the
possible.
DNA is not there.
Yeah, no.
I'm talking about like collagen
yeah.
and like blood vessel wall tissues and things like that.
Why is the Western Gobi such a hotspot for fossils?
The Nemeth Formation in particular just is really excellent depositionally. It's a mix of desert locality, which can bury large body fossils, and I believe a braided river system, which can bury a lot of small stuff. It has excellent preservation quality in some aspects and terrible preservation quality in others. The fossils that come out of the Western Gobi are almost visually and chemically, not chemically, but visually and texturally indistinct from real bone, which is really cool if you think about it. And then when you think about it more, it becomes really, really difficult because it's hard to tell fossil bone from real bone in the Gobi if it's removed partially from a matrix. Generally, a qualified paleontologist will look at it and tell you. But the main issue is that it is almost impossible to prepare. I watched this talk from the preparator at the ANS, not the ANS, the AMNH, who was talking about Gobi Desert fossils and preparation techniques. And you have to use so much glue because these things will crumble in your hands as you're air scribing them because they are so light.
There was someone asking me a bit ago about what some good books would be that would be informational but like understandable for like middle schoolers.
For middle schoolers, I'm trying to think about what dinosaur books I read in middle school. Depends on how late you are in middle school. I was in 8th grade the first time I started reading Michael J. Benton's Vertebrate Paleontology 3rd edition. Maybe 9th grade. For middle schoolers.
What do you think about All Yesterdays?
All Yesterdays is a little bit esoteric. It's definitely accessible for early high schoolers. But it's not. It kind of assumes a level of knowledge about paleontology.
That's true. Yeah.
That a middle schooler probably wouldn't have. It is written in a very accessible way. It's written for the public, and any adult could definitely pick that up and read it if you're at like a high school reading level. But I don't know if you could get a lot out of it unless you're pretty into paleontology.
Yeah.
Tell you what, this book is pretty accessible here. Dinosaurs: A Concise Natural History by Fastovsky and Weishampel is a textbook, but I found it very accessible when I was reading it. How do you know how old are dino when they died? Like 8 years old. We use primarily lag lines to figure that out. When you cut open the long bone of an animal, it has rings kind of like a tree, and those rings form when growth rapidly slows. So if you're growing quickly for a period of time, like 6 months, and then your growth rapidly slows, then it forms a line in the bone called a lag line. And those lag lines form reliably every year when animals undergo harsh winters, because food is going to be abundant during some parts of the year and then difficult to find during other parts of the year. And no matter how generalist you are, there's going to be fluctuations in food availability, and those will form lag lines.
Micah was asking about how we can tell their diet.
Coprolites, tooth isotope analysis, and comparative anatomy with living organisms.
And also, we sometimes have dinosaurs preserved
with their
stuff in
stomach contents. That I guess I'm lumping
I feel
that.
like that's kind of the
That's
most
a big one.
Obvious.
Yeah, but so we use the known data and then we extrapolate it with the unknown data, basically. So, if we find a kind of dinosaur with teeth very similar to another dinosaur that we know guaranteed the diet of via stomach contents or predation marks on nearby animals or that sort of thing, then we can extrapolate that, these teeth are almost exactly the same. It was probably eating a comparable food source from its own paleo environment. We're going to get the last guest up for the night, Brady. Welcome up, Brady. What's your question?
Yo.
Hello.
Hi. So, my question is, what's the coolest dinosaur and why is it Triceratops?
Okay. I'll humor you. I think Triceratops is really cool. Particularly because it has that like giant solid frill that's even more like dense and powerful compared to the other ceratopsians. Because like you see the other ceratopsians, they have those big like fenestrae in their frill. Triceratops just has this like solid shield of bone that's so cool, and we have some pretty serious fossil evidence of Triceratops kind of shrugging off tyrannosaur bites, which is not something that most dinosaurs could do. I do not think Triceratops gets enough credit for being as powerful of an animal as it definitely was.
Thank you. They're so cool. They'd be the most useful dinosaur. I think they'd be very easy to train. I think they'd be docile.
I don't know about docile.
No, they're
I think
homies.
they're a very threatening animal. I don't know if I would
Not
get
to
in.
me. Maybe to you, but to me, he'd just be my boy.
Hey, you know what?
No, but thank you for talking to me,
If you got
buddy.
that attitude, I bet they would cooperate.
Thank you for talking to me.
Yeah, of course.
Have a great evening.